if you can produce something that people want and sell it for for more than it costs for you to produce it,
You
that is
got
the
something.
magical thing called capitalism and called
Yeah,
business.
no, I agree.
It is very simple. And so,
If you believe we can change the narrative, if you believe we can change our communities, if you believe we can change the outcomes, then we can change the world. I'm Rob Richardson. Welcome to Disruption Now. Welcome to Disruption Now. I'm your host and moderator, Rob Richardson. As always, we like to bring stories of those who are creating change, who are either building a business or focused on social innovation. And my guest today is no different. Tremain Davis. We got a chance to meet during DC Startup and Tech Week. We quickly became really just kindred spirits that we're both here focused on making sure that everybody has access to technology and all are empowered because it is the new economic wave of freedom. We talk about it often. Digital literacy, digital ownership. Those are the keys to the future when it comes to creating the new civil rights movement. And Tremain has been at the forefront of that really all of his life. So Tremain, good to have you on the show. How you doing, brother?
man, thank you so much for having me, Rob. This is incredible. I love your platform. Just excited to participate in the conversation, man. Hopefully, can add value in some kind of small way.
All right. Well, yeah, for sure. So I know you're a multi-time entrepreneur. You've been an entrepreneur since the beginning. Um, how did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or what sparked this journey into entrepreneurship, which is glorified but often not really understood for what it takes to get here?
Yeah, I mean, I love that part of it. I mean, glorified definitely, and I think the main thing that did that was social media. Because a lot of
Yeah,
people can post the Lamborghinis, and you see in a snapshot what took somebody 15, 20 years to build, and you can't bake down 20 years of development into a 30-second meme or a 30-second post or reel, and that's what happens on social media. So it gives people the illusion that this is an easy journey, man. Entrepreneurship is hard. It is
yeah.
difficult. It is not an easy undertaking. I mean, you really have to sacrifice it all. You have to go all in. There's no such thing as halfway crooks. Who said that?
Scared to look.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's not in the 90s, man. And that's a real thing. You can't go halfway into
Y'all young kids didn't
entrepreneurship.
understand that reference. Some of y'all
Yeah,
might
yeah,
have,
yeah.
though. The real true hip hop legends, the real true hip hop.
The real true hip hop legends, for sure, for
Yeah, the
sure.
historians of hip hop.
Yep, 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 yep. I mean, so for me, I grew up in Southeast Washington, D.C., man, in the mid 90s or late 80s, mid 90s. And it was not a great place. I mean, murder capital. I mean, it was one of those type of situations where I was a dreamer, always have been. I'm not really sure what that came from, but I always would look at my surroundings and say, how can I get out? Like, it's got to be more to this than the streets that I'm walking around on. And
Absolutely.
like that was always, I was always curious. I was always wondering about, is there more? So that kind of was innate, and always wondering. What actually,
Tremaine, if you can tell me,
yeah.
is there any point that you remember the spark? Was there any moment or something that you knew that, okay, I'm going to take control of my own life. I'm going to be in entrepreneurship. If you can, is there any moment that like sticks out in your mind, or you just kind of
Oh,
knew from?
100%. I can
Okay,
tell you
what is
the
that moment?
exact moment. Exact moment. I'm in eighth grade. I was in eighth grade, and I started. In my school, it was an illegal underground candy business in my school. And during that time period in my school, I also got my first job scooping ice cream at Baskin Robbins. I don't know if anybody remembers Baskin Robbins, 31
Yeah,
flavors.
Master Rob is still around. I don't think they all
I
gone.
think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That was my first actual job, and so I had this business. It was underground. The reason I say it was underground because I went to like this really strict private school, and they didn't allow like outside candies and these types of things. So I had this business where I'm like hand to hand taking orders in first period, delivering them by lunch, and taking more orders. I had runners. I'm doing hand to hand at the water fountain. It was insanity, man, over a freaking candy business, and because I'm the only provider on campus. Like I'm like getting popular and getting famous. The headmaster
my
lady.
man had a monopoly and a whole
Oh my
logistics
God,
operation
it
in
was
eighth
it was
grade.
serious, man. It was serious. The headmaster lady she didn't know who it was, so she threatened to expel whoever it was when she found out who it was, and so that made me even more popular. I had a couple of like the younger teachers that found out that it was me, and they pulled me into their classrooms after class and told me they found out it was me, and I ended up putting them on payroll. I gave them $30 a week I had two teachers on payroll, man, and not say anything. I had friends. It was growing so much to supply the whole campus that I couldn't keep all the candy in my locker. So I had to get friends to store candy in their locker, and I paid them in candy. So
Wow.
but
Wow, dude,
anyway, so
you were
I
an
was,
entrepreneur
oh my
early.
gosh, so I was doing this at school, and then I would leave school and go to this part-time job at Baskin Robbins. And I don't know if you guys remember. If you're old enough, you remember. You used to have to put 2 weeks in the hole, and what that meant was that you would work a job, and then you had to work 2 weeks, and then you had to work a second 2 weeks, and they would give you your first paycheck. And so you work for like over a month before you got your first paycheck. Now I know this is old school. That's not how it was. So long story
Right.
short, I'm doing my candy business and I'm working this job out there, and I got my first check after working like a slave after school in Baskin Robbins scooping ice cream. Now, I mean, I'm only 13 years old or something like that. So, Rob, after all the hard work I've been doing in Baskin Robbins, I just knew my first check was going to be like $1 million, right? So, like I'm like, this has got to be like the come up of the century, man. When they handed me that first check, I would never forget this number. It was $273.86 after have been working for over a month. $276.83. And Rob, I'm making that in like 3 days at school with two teachers on payroll. I got employees, I got runners, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
what part of the
like,
game is this?
man, and so like I got the check from the dude that ran the Baskin Robbins. He handed it to me. I opened it. I looked at it. I asked him. I said, "Is this like serious? Like, did you miss a zero?" He was like, "No, they take taxes out. I know you young. You won't understand." He's saying stuff like that. I was like, "Man, I know one thing I do understand. I'm telling you, this what I'm about to tell you changed my life." I decided right there that jobs are for suckers. Like I did. Like I'm talking about eighth grade. I said that to my I left out the store. I quit. I told him that's it for me. I'm not coming back. I took that check. I didn't come back. And when I walked out the store, I said to myself, jobs are for suckers. And I because I'm like, I'm making this in 2, 3 days at school doing my own thing. And I got dudes that got degrees as teachers, taking $30 a week from this snot-nosed kid because I'm adding value in a way, and I couldn't articulate it like that back
Right,
then.
right.
But just, looking backwards, because I'm adding value in a way that nobody else could on campus. And I decided then that I didn't know what business was. I didn't know, but I just knew right there at that moment that I was not going to be a traditional job dude. Like I was not going to do it.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. So, so like going to that. So from eighth grade, you were a born hustler. It was there. Now, get me to the point of your full kind of more mature entrepreneurial journey and your first kind of step into that. And specifically, think about whenever that first kind of mature business is. I mean, the candy business is you're more mature than a lot of people ever get to. So you already had logistics, you already had employees, you already figured out how to reduce your cost of goods. I mean, you did a lot that you didn't even see, right? But now let's take your kind of first business venture because I really
Yeah.
want to talk about that, and then take yourself back to that moment in time if you can.
Yeah. So, I
What
mean,
advice
really, oh,
would
go
you give
ahead.
your younger self, really quick?
Mhm.
So, like, question just like in a concise way, and then you can dive into the story. What advice would you give your younger self, and what advice would you ignore?
Yeah, so the ignoring advice is easy, which is you're stupid, don't do it. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
you got a
right.
lot of that, and I was so young when I started my first business. We'll get into that in a second. So I had a lot of naysayers, and I think that just comes with the territory of doing things
It
that
does.
are counterintuitive or just not really something that everybody else is doing. So you're going to get a lot of that. So that was the advice that I would have ignored. But at the time, it was meaningful because it's people that you think care about you. These types of
And
things.
and they may too. I
They
want to say this
may,
real
yeah,
quick. No, no,
absolutely.
and they probably do.
Yep.
But
Yep.
folks
Yep.
giving you advice that haven't been in business aren't the
Yep.
right mentors for that. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It's just that, like, if I want to learn to play basketball, I'm not going to talk to a hockey player. And if I want
Absolutely.
to, right, and
Absolutely.
if I want to learn to be an
Absolutely.
entrepreneur, I can't talk to somebody that doesn't understand entrepreneurship. And unfortunately, it's been seen as this thing we shouldn't do as a community. We should get a safe job, get our education, and there's nothing wrong with those things. And some of those things are paths to entrepreneurial thinking, by the way.
Right,
So,
right, right,
but
right.
like we've gotten to this place where we've often been, told that that's not something you should do. You should
Yeah,
do the safe thing in order to really
yeah.
protect yourself and your family.
Well, and then you got to go back. I mean, I started my first company 25 years ago. You talking about 99, 2000. And
Yeah,
like,
that's where that grace coming in.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Got that great coming in now. But it wasn't even called entrepreneurship. Like that wasn't even a word back
No.
then. This was just this crazy business stuff. Like, what are you doing? Like, the guys that wrote the book on entrepreneurship, the Steve Blanks, the Eric Reeses of the world, Clay Christensen, like they were writing the book on entrepreneurship as I was doing it. So there
Right.
was no YouTube didn't exist. Like, you couldn't find this information. You was really just kind of taking a chance and people thought that you were literally crazy. In my situation, it was even crazier. So you fast forward like 2 years after the crazy candy story, I was, just so happened to been blessed to be able to play basketball. So I was all state in Maryland, all county, all of the stuff in my high school career. And if you can, any of the old heads can remember before smartphones, in order to get your game footage or to get recruited to play basketball back in those days, you had to have a old fashioned video recorder with a camcorder and a VHS
Yeah.
tape, and you had to have somebody at your game to tape you on these big old clunky tapes, and then you had to go get copies of it made, highlight reels, and snail mail them all across the country and hope that a recruiter got back to you. So I went through that whole process in high school, again, before technology was really a thing like it is
Absolutely.
today. And I said in 12th grade, I'm like not getting the recruiting that I think I should get. I mean, I'm all state, all county, but I didn't have as big of a name as some of the guys that I played against that went to the NBA, like Keith Bogans and Joe Forte, and some of these guys that had really good NBA careers that played against me in high school. I didn't have the name. And so I was just like, well, what do we do? And so I started thinking about this in 12th grade, how to solve this problem. And so I actually got a small scholarship to go a full ride at Southern Maryland and play basketball. And I went through there my first year thinking about this idea. And then I went back my second year and I came back a preseason All American. I had all these offers from around the country and I broke my ankle like 3 or 4
Mm.
games into the season, my second year, and I was out for the season. And so now you still expected to participate in practice and do all of the
Right.
things. I'm there to play basketball. And I got this idea that's burning. I couldn't take it anymore, especially if I couldn't play ball. And so I dropped out of college my second year on crutches and started my first tech company. Now, what the company was, to give you just a quick background, is I don't know if you remember Black Planet. That was like the
I
great
remember Black
grandfather.
Planet. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
that
I'm
was
old
like the
enough to go
first
back.
social media. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's one of the first. Hey, y'all, that's before Facebook and
That's
everything else.
way before. That's the
And
great,
it was
great,
yeah,
great grandfather of Facebook.
exactly.
You know what I
I got some
mean?
dates on Black Planet, but we ain't gonna go.
Yes.
We're not gonna go too far down that road. But go
Yep,
ahead.
yep, yep. When I first got to campus, because my whole thing was like, how do you solve this idea, this problem of recruitment around the country for players? Because I'm sure that if you're not a blue chipper, like you're not the top player in the country, there's tons of second tier players, I guess, such as myself, who are just as good, but just don't have the notoriety. How do you
Right.
get them some? And so I got on campus, and the very first thing I did, I'm talking my first year, my first day on campus, one of my teammates said, "You got to get on Black Planet." Dude, I'm from the hood. We barely had a TV in the house, let alone a computer,
Yeah.
some bag on Black Planet. I don't know anything about computers, email, nothing. And so he takes me into the library, he sets me up an email account, and he gets me onto Black Planet. Now, of course, it's about girls at the time. So he's like, you can talk to
I
girls
called
from
it.
all across the country, yeah, on Black Planet using Instant Messenger and all this stuff. And so, like, I was like, oh, really? And so I get on Black Planet, and sure enough, you can talk to girls from all the way around the country. Now, I go straight to being an entrepreneur, and I say, wait a minute. I should create Black Planet for sports recruitment. And that was the epiphany I got the first day I was on campus to play basketball. What if there was a Black Planet for sports recruitment where college coaches can see players and their game film anywhere in the country? And then that
Yeah.
solves the recruitment problem. And so I had that idea. The idea in 12th grade, but it didn't crystallize on how to
Right.
do it.
Right.
Once I saw Black Planet, I immediately said, this is the way to do this idea I've had for a year. Then I played ball a whole year. And then like I said, I got hurt my second year. And I dropped out and I started what I called cathlete.com. And
Right.
what we were doing is we were creating the Black Planet for sports recruitment. That was
So
my
how do you go?
first
Like, so,
epiphany.
so going down that road there. So you started this Black Tech. Sorry, not Black Tech, but this Black Black Planet for recruitment. Uh, Now, did you know how to code? Did you
No,
know
I've
any of
never
that
been a
stuff? So
technical
like,
founder. Never been a
so like you're
technical
not been a
founder.
technical founder. Walk people
Nope.
through that process, right? So you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
especially then, like right now, it's never easy, but it's
yeah.
much
Much
easier
more.
now
Yeah,
than it
yeah,
was
yeah,
than it was
yeah.
then. Like you can pop up a website if you really kind of put in 3 or 4 hours, you can figure it out. But
Man,
you can probably do it now.
I never even had a computer growing up, Rob. I
So
mean,
how'd
and
you go
we
about this? Like you out here, like
starting
where
a
does one
tech
start?
company.
Yeah.
So here's where it started. So listen, the internet is just coming out. I mean, AOL, America Online, is just
Yep.
getting big. So all this, so tech, where it was back then, 25 years ago, is not what it is today. First and foremost. So the first thing I had to think about was building a team. So if there's any entrepreneurs out there, what I would say is lean into your skill sets. And what I'm really good at is the stuff we're doing right now, Rob, which is relating to people, creating relationships, finding ways and strategies on how to add value, how to build
Absolutely.
teams and relate to people, interpersonal relationships. I'm good at that stuff. And so the first thing I say when I have this epiphany that I want to do this idea is that I need to know somebody. Now, back then, it wasn't like how to code. It was like I need to know somebody who knows computers because
Yeah, yeah.
there's no smartphones, there's no apps. Everything was web based back then. So we had to
Yep.
create a website, type of thing. And so I started asking around, and this guy I know, he's like, oh, my nephew is good with computers. And he was like a couple years older than me. I'm 19. He's like 22, 23.
Right.
And so I told him about my idea. He's like, oh, yeah, I'll help you with that. And he was just graduating from, I don't know, Virginia Tech, one of them.
Right.
And we together went out to try to build this company. We raised a couple of dollars on friends and family, a couple of angels, put some money in. And I mean, the solutions were dirty, Rob. I mean, these were dirty solutions trying to get to this
Yeah.
thing that we were going to take to market. And just to give people a little bit of context about what we discovered throughout this process is that what we really were doing, and we didn't know this, and this is another thing I always advise entrepreneurs at this stage of the game, looking back on it, is to understand the macro environment, the bigger market that you're trying to
Mm.
go into, because our idea is that we wanted to solve sports recruitment. What we were really doing was solving streaming video. Now, we were out 6 years before YouTube came out.
Yeah.
And the whole idea was that we wanted to stream 30 seconds of game film, onto our platform so that any college coach or recruiter can see, from around the country. And that was so we kept bumping our heads up against two things. One is, how do you
Infrastructure
stream
costs.
online? Yeah, because I mean, we were still just coming off a dial-up internet. So how do you stream
Yep.
in that environment? And the second thing, this is the little known fact, was storage. How do you store
Yeah, oh,
all
yeah,
of
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
data?
There was no
Back
AWS
then, oh
then.
my gosh. I mean, you could buy a computer, a whole computer back then. It was still coming from a storage standpoint with
Yeah, you
MB.
basically had to buy servers, right? That's what's the only way I could see you doing it.
Man, I mean, we were buying these little computer boxes that were still coming in MBs and having to network them together like a real data cloud, storage cloud, like
Damn.
dirty solution, man. And like gigs didn't even exist. You talk about 2 gigs, 3 gigs, on your iPhone, you buy it, it's got 16 gigs on it. That did not exist back then in one place, especially for like a startup,
Yeah.
type of thing. You didn't have access to that type of stuff. And so, like, the way we were trying to solve it was very, 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 very entrepreneurial. Let me put it that
Well,
way.
yeah.
But those were the two things that we were really solving, but we didn't know that. You know what I mean? We thought we were trying to solve streaming video. I mean,
I mean, but how would you like going back? I sometimes,
exactly.
and maybe you would, but like sometimes I think even Mark Zuckerberg said this: an idea is not fully formed until you start doing it. So like it's very. I think you can try to see, and you probably have more of the ability to see the forest for the trees now, and able to
Of
try to
course.
like
Of course.
because of, but it's building that muscle.
Yep.
But even when you have some of that muscle built, it's you can start one concept and not see it till
Yeah.
you start really
Yeah.
kind of dive into it. But you kind of always like, so now you've learned that lesson in terms of seeing things. And I want to talk a little bit about AI in a second and
Sure.
relate to two conversations, because I think there's a good point to lean on here. In fact, that you had this transitional moment at the beginning of the internet, and now I feel like we're in another kind of stage
Oh,
with
100%.
AI, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, and I'm sure there are lessons that you can draw from being at that earlier stage. I like to tell folks that there's no wasted activity when you're doing something productive,
Oh,
right?
yes. Yes.
Even if you quote unquote fail, um, if you actually learn and don't give up, like these things become applicable in the future. So that all that muscle tissue that you built up in your brain, those synapses that were created from learning how to do the candy store to learning how to then build a internet company from the ground up in the old fashioned way. Learning how to think is something that will never that will never go away. It is something
Yeah,
that is definitely
yeah,
is needed.
yeah,
Learning how to create value, understanding vision, and articulating that are very important. Now we're moving to the AI age. Not moving, we are in it.
yeah.
I'm curious to see, do you see any comparisons to the beginning of the internet and the AI movement? And what lessons do you think you can take from us being seasoned enough to be at all the stages of the internet to be at this current stage? Like, what's the most important lesson you think you can grab from the past that's applicable to the present?
Man, listen, one thing that I like to tell people is that we're not going to see another like period of time like this for another 150 years. Like I'm going to be dead and gone, and my grandkids are going to be experiencing the next boom that's happening like it's happening right now. And the fact that we saw two of them so close together, we'll never see that again in our lifetime. So the internet happened, and like I participated in that. Like we were building a company right as the stuff that we use today, like we were out trying to solve streaming video, although we didn't know it. That's what we were working on 6 years before YouTube, 5 years before YouTube, which is ubiquitous now on the planet. You know what I mean? Mark Cuban got his first billions from AudioNet, which was taking,
Absolutely.
like some of the richest people in the world were working on the same stuff that we were working on at the time. You know what I mean? And so like
They just have more capital. Let's
they
be
had
clear.
more capital. They were. I mean, Mark Cuban was probably way smarter than me too. I will say that.
Maybe not. I mean,
Maybe not.
it's
I don't know. I
uh,
don't know.
I don't like. I think smart. There's a lot of smart people, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
It's like
True. True. True.
access to networks and
Access, yeah.
opportunities
I didn't have
matter.
any. Now that's one thing I will say is that I didn't have access to network. I didn't. I mean, I started literally from the gutter when it comes to where I am today, because I didn't have access to network resources, capital, like nothing, and I had to figure it all out on my own. But to answer your question, like there was a time when the internet was being born, like 95 to 2005 with YouTube and
Yep.
all of that stuff. 2007 is when Facebook came out. Right after that, the iPhone came out. So there's like a 15-year gap from like 95, 96 to like 2010 where like everything that we use today was invented. You know what I'm saying? And like,
Right.
even if it was already invented, I'm talking about maybe even commercialized. That happened in like this 15-year gap. Now we're seeing that same opportunity happen right now where the
Absolutely.
next 10 years of AI development is going to shape the next 100. And that during that 15 years, there was so many billionaires, 100 millionaires, multi-millionaires born because they either invested in the technology that supported or came out of the internet. They founded something in or around that space. Yes, a lot of dead bodies and a lot of, skeletons from that time period as well. But it was such an era of innovation because once the internet, problem was solved and became ubiquitous, now you can start doing things like streaming. Now you can start, I mean, that's what made the iPhone hit the way
Yeah.
it did. It converged
Absolutely.
all of these technologies at the perfect time.
Yep.
And like that's what's happening right now. And I'm telling people just on a bullhorn from the top of the mountain, screaming it as loud as I can, get involved. Like the next wave of billionaires is gonna happen because of where we are with it looks like where we are with AI looks just like it did back in 97 when the internet was first coming
Yeah.
out. You know what I
No,
mean?
and it's
It
gonna have
looks
a
just
yep.
like it.
No, I completely agree. It looks a lot like it. I tell people there are, and now I think about it, there might actually be five stages to the digital revolution. There was just the read version, which was the first starting of the internet when people just put up sites, right? Then there was the centralization versions when it's read and write, right? When the social media, Airbnb, the kind of centralization.
Yep.
We're still in this phase of we still might stay centralization, but there's a third stage in terms of ownership of data. There's this, so that's the Web3 component. People think about blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
owning your data, authenticating your data. Like no one thought, a lot of people, I knew it was important. That's where I stuck on for, that's where I was before getting into
Right,
full into AI and data.
right, right.
But the two are related because now the fourth stage is we're on AI, which is the manipulation, the mass distribution,
Yep,
the recreation of data
yep.
just from having some data, right? And so like, and then there's a fifth point that we'll get into on a whole other podcast, which is quantum computing, right? So like
Absolutely,
that's all those
absolutely.
adding together is going to really recreate how we interact in the world, how we tell stories, how we experience the world. But there are some fundamentals one still has to have. Like at least I believe that, right? So I think your experience does you well because I had a conversation earlier with a leadership coach, and she said there's a lot of applications. There are a lot of people putting applications now out for these jobs using AI. The problem is they're not qualified for these jobs they're putting out, so they're like over flooding things and understanding like we need to use AI. But I told this to my son, who told me I was telling him about financial literacy. I think we had this conversation before, right? And he's like, well, I don't need to know all this. I can just look it up. I said, well, you can't look up how to think. so,
How to solve a
so
problem.
yeah, exactly. Those are things you got to develop the muscle for, get
Yes,
into the
yes.
grind for.
Yeah,
So let's talk
yeah.
about AI. Because everybody says get into AI. How would you advise someone to do that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a couple of different things. Like everybody's not going to build, you know what I mean, their own, large language model. Like everybody's not going to do that, but I think the first thing that I would say is to just calibrate yourself to what's happening right now. I think just understanding where we are in the market, like where we are as a human race, people have no clue. And so I just tell people to just first take a second and just think through like, hey, wait a minute, this thing is happening. AI is not something to be scared about. AI is not something that you need to be fearful about. It's going to take my job. Oh no, you can't approach it that way
Yeah,
because this
because
thing.
you have no control over stuff you don't control.
Absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely. You got to get in the game. And I think so many people are just sitting on the sideline just for fear or just not understanding exactly what's going on. So that's the first thing. Just you can get on a podcast. I know you got tons of content around what this thing is.
absolutely, I
How
do.
can you? I mean, it's free on YouTube, free on podcasts like this. Like just listen to a 5 or 10 minute, you know, piece of content, short form, doesn't have to be a long, class at Harvard, although
Yeah,
that's available for free as well, just to understand what's happening and where we are. The second thing I would say is that AI is not like new. Like this is the second
no,
or
AI
third
is not.
iteration
Yeah.
of it. Like people don't understand that they've
Generative
been doing
AI is new. AI
exactly
as a concept is
Siri
not
and
new.
Alexa and all of these things that we use Siri, turn my water on. Alexa, turn on my favorite music or my favorite song. Like you've been using this stuff for
Netflix,
10
all
years.
that
Yeah,
stuff, intelligent search.
absolutely. Absolutely. So we've been engaging with it already in the main space. So just think about it like this. AI is used to bring your favorite movies to the forefront on Netflix. That's why Netflix is always suggesting your favorite shows and shows that you think you would because it's using this technology. Then Netflix is not even, I mean, it's barely a 20-year-old company. You see what I'm saying? So
Yep.
that's how fast this technology is moving and that would be my third point is that it's moving way faster than it was 25 years ago when I
Yeah.
first got started. And I think right now, I'm not going to say the scary part, but the part that's way more interesting to me about the whole development piece of it is that you can develop stuff and go to scale so quickly now. You couldn't do that 25 years ago. You had to
Yeah.
build it small, then you had to get a few clients, a few customers, build your work your way up. But because the technology is developing so fast and you have access to so many people, you can build a technology. I mean, ChatGPT had 300 million users or something like in the first
Yeah.
year. It was something
Yeah.
insane.
But they were given $1 billion up
Well,
front.
they were, they were,
We
they
should
were,
be,
they were.
we
But
should,
I mean, even with
yeah.
$1 billion 25 years ago, you wouldn't be able to accomplish
No,
that.
you wouldn't be able to scale that fast
Exactly.
and do
You
that.
just
Yes.
wouldn't be, even with $1 billion, you wouldn't have, you just, the infrastructure wasn't there. But now that the infrastructure is there, and you talked about that, you can scale so quickly with this technology, which means that it's going to leave certain populations, and this is where I have a real soapbox, populations of people behind, especially Black and brown communities, and other more diverse communities that aren't thinking about the future of AI, the future, and not even just AI, the future of just technology in general, are not thinking meaningfully about it. It'll really find certain communities left in the dust, and like that's something that I'm really passionate about because I think equity is a big, big, big risk when it comes to how fast this technology is
Well,
moving.
yeah, because it's not a consideration for the technology. Like as we talk about building a responsible AI, we often talk about it at Disruption Now and at our
Yeah.
signature conference, Midwest Con. It's when we talk about responsible, people talk about responsible AI and all the time. And this, I kind of equate it like this. I say, responsible AI is the new DEI. What do I mean by that? Wild ass statement. This is what I mean. Okay. Uh, a lot of people say it and don't have any real meaning when they actually say the shit. It's just something that they say to be thought of, to say, oh, we're thinking about it. Lots of people are not thinking about it, and they're not, because it's the whole infrastructure has been built to be inequitable. But like what I tell Fortune 500 companies, the big players in this space, is that you want to do this because you're going to need to build trust. And if you have a whole population that becomes so mistrustful, we can go backwards on innovation. So it's in your interest to actually do this in a way that actually is more accessible, that is transparent.
Yeah.
Now, I
You
don't think they're
know,
going to do it. I don't think they're going to do it. But like,
yeah.
I think we got to push for it and do everything we can. But I do think that's the conversation I have with them when we talk about this.
Well, you know what, and I think we had a brief part of our discussion to leading up to this podcast about this. I don't know if that is the right I don't know if that's the right approach because the,
Right.
the the way you change behaviors, especially in such a capitalist society like America, and just basically all of our allies, which is most of the world, is there has to be a substantive business model that drives the change. And so I don't know, and this is just my
No, no, look,
hypothesis.
this is
I don't
disruption.
know
Like
if
we
there's
ain't got to agree.
I don't know. Well, no, 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 no. But I'm just saying, I don't know if there's a business model to support equitable AI. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know
Yes.
because I mean, even if you just think about the technology as it is today, especially the tech that's kind of becoming ubiquitous that everybody's using, it was built by a very small few people,
Yep.
few set of people, and those that are now trying to get into AI, meaning building out their own form of it, their own LLMs and things like that. One thing that they're having a problem with is how do you commercialize? What's the business model behind? You can't just get into AI. You know what I'm saying? Like you can, it's great that we're doing it. It's great that bit, but what these larger firms and covering Google and all these, what they have mastered is how to the business model behind it. And that's why they're able to drive the narrative. There are a lot
Yeah.
of people that are getting into AI, but I think one conversation that we need to have as builders is how do you commercialize the AI? Because if
Well,
there isn't a substantive business model that's driving the innovation, listen, everybody talks about innovation, but there is no money in innovation. The innovation is in replication. I mean, the money is
right,
in replication. There's no money in innovation. The money is in replication. How do you take something that you innovated on and then make it so that a billion people can use it? That's where the
right,
money is. And that's what Google does well. That's what Tesla does well, all Netflix, that's what they do.
right.
It's not just the innovation. You have to wrap that around a business model that can now add value to billions of people. And I guess because I'm an entrepreneur, and to your point, have,
Yeah,
honed this skill set over 25 years, I can see the real issue. The real issue is
yeah,
not necessarily equity. The real issue is not necessarily innovation. All of those things are there. It's commercialization. Like that's what moves the needle. And these
yeah,
larger companies are the ones who do that really, really well.
yeah. And I think I would have a different perspective on that. I think
Sure.
yes, they obviously do it well. I mean, that's you can't argue with you can't argue with creating $1 trillion company. Um, Kind of speaks for itself
Yeah,
in terms
yeah,
of doing that.
yeah.
I will say though, what makes this different from every iteration of entrepreneurship, of innovation, whatever adjective we want to use to describe what we're talking about here, is that AI. data is derivative. It's building on itself. So it's much easier to create digital dictatorships, and then for you not to and for folks to be able to control data. So the question is, I believe it's going to become extremely. It's going to be extremely important to figure out what this looks like, and I think it will be a model, because what's also a model is if when there's a business that is at its core also has a mission that is about solving some type of pain point or problem or rallying a community, right? So this is my thesis and this is my theory. And again, we'll see how it plays out. No one can predict the future, but I hope to try to envision it. I
Sure.
believe that a lot of the inequalities that have happened over time, particularly I'm talking in the digital realm, those things have never been adequately addressed. From the input of the data to the infrastructure where people actually have access to the internet, all those things, right? The information is more democratized than it ever has been. So two things, but at the same time, inequalities are starting to stretch out larger than they have been at the same time. And I think the
Absolutely.
issue to that comes to a few things. So when I talk about equity, it's also your point. I completely agree with. It's about making sure people have the knowledge. They go out there and learn. We have complete agreement there. Go learn. I tell people learn by doing. The same thing when I discuss blockchain. It's the same thing that applies to AI. Go to ChatGPT, learn some new. Just go on there and just see how it applies. Play
It's
around with it.
free.
It's free. Go to Perplexity. Go to Notebook LM. That's another thing that I use for this podcast preparation today that
Yep.
can help you actually prepare, get notes, and then learn how to. I like to say I don't think AI should be a total replacement for people, and I think there will be. Just like people didn't the business model in creating food used to be that just create, mass produce the food, don't worry about the quality of it, push it out as fast as you can and mass produce it. And that was the model for the first 30, 40, 50 years of food. But then people started saying, well, what's in this? And then
Mm-hmm.
people wanted to have organic. They wanted transparency. So I believe that's going to happen with the type of art and things that we create. I believe people are going to want to have a dance with humans involved. I still think we need to work with AI. I am pro AI. I'm just pro authenticity. I'm pro transparency, and I'm pro ethical. And I do
No,
think there
yeah.
will be. I do
Listen.
think there will be a. I do think there will be. I don't think in the short term. I agree exactly what you say. So probably it's going to be. We're going to rush to that, and I believe that there's going to be errors because of that, and that's going to have openings in the market. And there will always be people that want to do this in a responsible way. So I do think there will be opportunities for that space, because so many others are just saying, "How can we rush without any type of guidance to what we're doing with AI?"
No, I listen. I don't. You might have misunderstood. I don't think you capturing it. I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree with
But
you.
you can. It's
One,
okay.
no, no, no. No, I do. I hear you. But I'm saying no. I do agree with you. My thing is just all of the elements that you just said, which are important. I'm just adding something to it.
Oh
I
yeah.
think in order for us to really move the needle is to figure out how we can take all the stuff that you just said and create a business model with it. You see what I'm
Yes.
saying? That's the only thing I'm just
Oh
adding
no,
to
no.
what you're saying.
And I
Yeah, because
completely
if we
agree.
can do that, then it becomes something that can grow. You can't like business is the most magical,
I agree.
mechanism on the planet. It's the only way to grow anything. I mean, if you can produce something that people want and sell it for more than it costs for you to produce it,
You
that is
got
the
something.
magical thing called capitalism and called
Yeah.
business.
No, I
Like
agree.
it is very simple. And so, like, if you can put equity, if you can put like these things in that wheelhouse, now it becomes a fuel and engine for growth, because now you have to look at it like Google has to say, wait a minute, these guys are focused on ethics. These guys are focused on things like compliance. These guys are focused on empowering the global South. These guys are
Yes,
focused on these types of things. And wait a minute, they got $1 billion. Their
right.
valuation is what? How did they do that? That's when it becomes something that that initiates change
I
at
agree.
scale. You know what I'm saying?
I would say one point that I want to get to infrastructure.
Yeah.
I would say yes, but
Okay.
um, there is a point where this is where I believe in policy, right? So I go
Yeah,
back to
yeah. You talk about policy.
yeah. So let's talk about the Industrial Revolution, right? And which there's no doubt over the course of time that's created more value. It's how we got here. But a lot of shit happened between then and where we got to in the 70s and 80s and 60s, right? We had two world wars. Okay, I want people to remember this, right? We had a massive redefinition of what it was like to work. People actually got rights in the workplace. That's a foreign concept to most of the world 99% of the time, right? That allowed us the freedom to have more entrepreneurs and things like that, having a
Yeah,
middle class.
yeah,
Those things we take for granted, but those are new freaking concepts. Last couple hundred years that is not the traditional way people think about things, right? We could still, and so like what I think we're going to have to do is that we're going to have to redefine how we interact and work with each other. What does policy look like? And I'm not saying I have the answer completely. I just know, and I'm very confident as I understand enough about algorithms in AI that they're so complex. No one has any full understanding of how it works. Hard stop. Nobody,
yeah. No,
right?
you're right.
Right?
You're
They
right.
don't. So,
Yep.
but although we can't fully understand or control systems, we can dance with them. As I said, although we can't predict the future, we can't envision what type of future we want. So what I say is we can use this technology in ways that solves almost all of our issues or amplifies a lot of our issues. We can use it to inform people more, or we can use it to how social media is doing it now, which is we can figure out how to fight over nonsense and make sure our brain is being hacked because we're creating alternate realities that actually aren't factual with what's happening. So
Yeah,
like we have
yeah,
to think about what type of future we want for humanity, right? And that has to be centered in what we do. So I think how you create that business model is through awareness and eventually through policy. Um, and then you're creating some level of standard. There will be no perfection, right? But what we will do is set like what do we want to have happen? Uh, what should it look like? What's the purpose in building this? And also, we might want to ask the question: should we build this? Because that's a real
mm,
question we should ask for some of these things sometimes,
mm,
right?
mm,
And unless
mm.
there is the government intervention in some ways, in a reasonable way that promotes innovation, but it needs to be involved. We know that capitalism without any type of restraint, that's how we got slavery, right? That's an
Mhm,
extreme example, but like
mhm,
all of this comes with balance, is all I'm saying,
mhm.
right? And we got to go full speed ahead, but we also need to just understand that this is a new this is new. This is much different than any technology we've ever had, and I'm hoping it's going to create these new type of jobs. I believe it will, but then there's also challenges there because then we got to figure out how to train people for these new jobs, and
Yeah,
we got to reset
yeah,
people's brains to think differently, uh, and kind of let go of the things that they are used to doing, which is also very difficult for the human psyche to do. So, like, we have to really wrestle and think about what does our future look like and not just take it for granted, right? We have to build and be
yeah.
intentional about the future we build. And then I want you to reply to that, and then I want to talk about your infrastructure play in terms of Africa, how you see and building that infrastructure, and then we'll kind of close out with some rapid fire questions.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. So, what I would say, especially from a policy standpoint, is that policy is going to be necessary. I mean, absolutely necessary. I think that as always, policy is way behind of innovation, especially substantive policy that makes sense. And you're trying to
Yeah,
straddle that line between not stifling innovation
it's tough
versus
on the straddle too.
creating. Yeah, but you still got to create those guardrails. I mean, I think that you're right. I think that so we, just a quick example. So we experienced a little bit of this. So I run an ed tech company. I run a couple of venture backed tech companies. One of them is in ed tech, and we build AI enabled educational programming. And our probably 85% of our clients are in the K to 12 space. So we work with cities and school districts, that type of thing. Now, if you know anything about that space, AI is not welcomed
Mm-mm.
in
No,
the
it's not.
classroom right now. So there is already regulations, heavy regulations. And that's just because we're dealing with minors. We're dealing with elementary, middle, and high school kids. So even though this technology exists and there isn't no broad, policy around the innovation part of it, there is actually some guardrails in certain verticals, and education is one of them. And so, especially at the high school, middle K to 12 space, and that's where we are.
Yeah,
So, but this technology is allowing us to reach communities in ways that just wasn't possible before, and get resources to rural Arkansas and rural Texas
absolutely. There's no question.
and New York City, in these boroughs where these are very, very, very poor young people that are trying to get resources on how to go to college and how to get a better
Yep.
career. We're using this technology, but we've had to get creative. So, like, I'll give you an example. We wanted to build an AI tool that was a virtual college and career counselor, and this tool, we had to do it with a rag. And so, if
Yes.
anybody doesn't know what a rag is, called retrieval augmented generation. That's what rag stands for. But basically, if we created our own data set, so that if one of the students asks our bot a question, it doesn't search all over the internet, to give them an answer. It
Oh,
searches
okay.
for the answer within our data set that we've been able to create and vet and those
Yeah,
types of things.
a rag, I
So,
think people know what it is. Like, basically, if you have it, it goes out and finds the information, but you directed it to have a specific data set. So,
specific data, right? So I'll give you an example. If some kid or parent or first generation student wants to know about FAFSA or potentially going to community college, our bot would be able to have an answer. But if you ask this same our bot about what North Korea is doing today, it'll say it doesn't know, because that's not in our data set. And
right.
so that us positioning our technology that way was able to be used in the K to 12 setting, where there is
Absolutely.
tons of regulations, because you're dealing with minors and kids and their data and
Right.
things like that. So, like, it's happening. Regulation
Right.
is happening, and, like, in the educational vertical, they're very cautious around AI, but they know that this technology can help to reach
Yeah. I
communities
mean,
that.
I think they're too cost. See, this is I go through that. And that's not even what I mean by data in terms of that. That's sort of what I mean by policy. They have some good stuff in place, but the mindset should be this is like trying to not do the internet. Like, we gotta figure out how they use this. So, I talk to
Yeah, yeah,
kids
yeah.
about how to use this.
I
Go
was
ahead.
saying that education is a good example of
That's a great
how
example.
you can probably straddle that line a little bit, because they have to be very, very, very strict on what technology is coming in, because you're dealing with these minors. But they
Right.
also know that you need to have the innovation, so that you can reach communities that haven't been reached before. And a lot
Yeah.
of those older administrators and teachers are retiring now. So there's a lot of 30 something, 40 something superintendents that are thinking more forward. So that space is going through a transition right now,
Right.
that I think, and this is just, again, we're early in it. I think that other verticals, that's what my point is, can look at education as a potential model for how to create regulations in other spaces. That's the
Absolutely.
point that I was getting to.
Absolutely. I mean, there's some other good models too. I mean, there's some models that go from. There's a model in Europe that everyone has essentially um, a constitutional right to their data and information. There are frameworks out there. None of them are perfect, but there are frameworks to go from that we certainly should be looking at. Okay, so let's talk more about how we actually get more equity. Like, because in a real way, like there's when it comes to AI, AI is also not just a software play; it's an infrastructure play, as you know. And I know you have a big vision for infrastructure that's worldwide. Tell us about that vision and why it's so important.
So it's a big idea. What they call it, a BHAG, a big,
Yeah,
hairy, audacious, yeah, goal. Yeah, listen. This is
Jim
something
Collins.
that,
Yeah, I know that. I
yeah,
know that from entrepreneurship. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, this is something I want to do. Hopefully, in the next couple of years, at least start on the seed of it, the seedlings of it, and
All right,
that's
you heard it
just,
here first. Let's
yeah.
see. This is what it's going to be. We're going to
Heard it here
project this
first.
into the universe. This is going to be
So,
documented in history
yep,
and time.
yep,
It's going to
history of
happen. Let's
time.
hear it.
Like I said, I run two venture-backed tech companies. We're hoping to exit the ed tech one at $1 billion in about 4 years, and we want to exit the deep tech one probably in the next 2 to 3 years, probably at around 100 million. That's our exit strategy on both of those. So I'm already thinking like, okay, well, what do I want to do next after 25 years of doing this stuff, and now I have such I don't know, heart for social impact, especially when you think about innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology. So I've been coming up with this idea that, how can we create the infrastructure globally so that, to your point, Rob, we can get more builders from every community on the planet building this technology. And I'm talking about regionally specific, because one of the problems with commercializing or coming up with substantive business models, let's just use LLMs, large language models, for instance, like AI and all that stuff is really good at language. I mean, that's one thing that it is good at. I
Yeah,
could
it
speak
is.
to somebody in Mandarin right now using some app on our phone and we'll be able to talk like we've been friends for 40 years, so it's good at that. But if you think about the cultural implications of what's happening with this AI, that's where you can start seeing some of the gaps. So we're here in America, and you can just use us as an example. Certain communities aren't represented. That's what we were talking about in the technology as it's being developed today. And that's here in America. So just imagine, Botswana, or just imagine, some other not as well known places on the globe. They will never have their own LLM that speaks directly to the cultural things that are meaningful for that region, these types of things. So, which means that the technology, in order for it to make sense for the region, has to be built regionally. It has to be
Yep.
built there. You think about the west coast of Spain, where they speak,
Yeah.
what is that, Cantonese?
Yep.
That's a very small, but that's very different if you go to the east coast of Spain, where they're speaking another language. And so how do you have this technology that can be very specific? So the problem is that it makes sense in China, they got 1 billion people. It makes sense to build this in India, they got 1 billion people. Here in the United States, in the society that we live in, it makes sense because capitalism pretty much runs everything. But in those smaller areas of the world, there is no business case for building this technology when you only have a country that has 30 million people in it. You know what I mean? There's no
Right.
global business case for that. So my idea is, how do we create an infrastructure where multiple developers of this technology from multiple places around the world can basically build regionally specific um LLMs
LLMs.
and this technology, right? That will help them to compete at a global
Well,
level.
I can tell you my thoughts, Ray, is that like that's going to take intervention and public-private partnerships. So, just the same way infrastructure has been built out, there wasn't actually a business case for the internet, as wild as it seems, right?
Oh,
Not
100%.
really.
Yeah,
So,
no,
like
it
it's
wasn't. Netscape was the
right,
first one. Netscape is who proved that there was a business model to the internet. When Netscape went public, that was when everybody said, "Oh, wait a minute, this
but it wasn't
internet
them.
thing."
It was actually the federal government that was doing it.
Oh, well,
Right,
of
and then
course, of
Netscape
course. See,
no, no,
well,
no, no, so then Netscape pulled from that, so I'm
yeah,
saying this to say
yeah,
there was billions and billions and billions poured into this technology over many years.
yep.
The same thing's gonna have to be required, so this is where you have public-private partnerships, you definitely need this is where you need government that understands that infrastructure is more than building out roads and bridges, it's now about building out digital infrastructure as well,
Digital infrastructure, absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
To be competitive. That's a part of what we're going to have to do to continue to be competitive. And we're still behind the United States in this too. So like we have to really, really build that out to get to really be able to maximize the technology in a way that's meant. So I want to get to these last kind of questions because we've been on for a while and it's been a great conversation.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
some of my rapid fire questions I like to ask. So, all right, what is an important truth you have that very few people agree with you on?
Oh man, uh, you know, That's a good one, man. So to me, listen, please don't put it in the chat. Don't come after Rob, guys.
It's all right.
My I guess my important truth that not many people agree on, especially in this in I guess my immediate community, is that I don't know if equity is the big issue. You know what I mean? It is
Yep.
an issue, but I don't think equity is the issue.
What is
And
the issue?
I think that the issue to me is commercialization because I
Okay.
think that resources, attention, all of that stuff goes to where the money flows. So if you can find a way to make money off the topic of equity, like I said, a business model behind it, then everybody is interested in it, and then it starts to move the
Yeah.
needle.
I
And
think you do make a good point on this in terms of because I think a lot in our community really stick on nonprofits. They focus on like instead of like, well, how do you create a sustainable business,
yes,
right? Because
yes,
I so to that I agree in terms of like you can't move a community unless you find ways to produce value and
yes,
come together to do that. So like there's no
absolutely.
disagreement to that. I think that goes towards mindset and working together and figuring out how to build because some of what that means is like everything won't commercialize at first, which means you got to have support from multiple people. Like a lot of these people have lots of runway and time to figure it out. We need to be in the same mindset as a community to invest in entrepreneurship, not as something that is a something that's wild out there that's only for other
Well,
people. Like,
you know what? To be honest with you, Rob, I don't think that it's the community's responsibility. I think it's people like my responsibility who's been
yeah,
in this space for 25 years, who have the
well,
access, who
that's
have the
actually what I mean,
network.
bro. That's what
Yeah,
I mean.
it
I mean,
is.
like,
That's
we
why I
got to
take
get our
this
community
on.
into the mindset. That's what I mean.
Yes, absolutely. It's our responsibility. That's like we're doing today to teach the community because we just don't have that built into our culture to go out and learn these things, invest in these things, build these things. It takes us to build the infrastructure so that others can come in and learn and build
Yep,
and grow and develop and innovate. And that's
absolutely,
that's part of what I'm doing now.
absolutely. All right, very quickly and concise. What's a slogan or theme in your life in like one sentence?
Uh the path, and this is something I say to myself all the time, the path less taken is where I became good, but the path never taken is where I became great.
That's good. All right. Final one. What do you see as the next big global disruption?
The next big global disruption. It's gotta be climate, it's gotta be food. Um, and I think the technology, the things that we're talking about today, are, I think they're interesting, but I think how you apply those things to things like food, climate, smart cities, I think it's the application. So everything that we talked about for the last hour, I think is interesting, but I think the application of it is what's going to be the
Yeah.
disruption for the next 20 years.
What's so interesting, you come full circle. Like it comes back to how do we make sure that humanity is taken care of and not destroy itself is what I hear
Absolutely.
you saying. Right.
Yep.
I mean, like it
Yep.
comes back to climate,
Yep.
food,
Yep.
honestly, geopolitical and not killing each other either. Let's we've actually had a good run relative for I'm not
Yeah.
saying everything's perfect,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
when you compare us to where we are for the last 30 years for the
Yeah.
rest of humanity,
Yeah.
most of humanity was constantly in conflict and wars. Like when people think about wars, like they just don't have any grasp of how many people died through wars. Just think
Absolutely.
about let's think
Absolutely.
about World War II as we end this. World War II, do you know how many people died during World War II? What the estimates are?
No.
What's your guess?
10 million?
It's over 50 million people,
Wow. Wow.
right? I mean, when people just
Wow.
think about that for a minute,
Wow.
like it's
Wow.
a lot of people, right?
Wow. Wow.
And there is no more. I don't think there's any more world wars. Like we got the equipment to wipe each other out quickly, and
Yeah. Yeah.
this technology will amplify that even more, right? So like we're gonna have to make sure we figure out a way together because it's not going to be destroying each other. We're not going to be able to outgun each other at this point. We can
Oh, no.
everybody has enough power to
Everybody
destroy.
has, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so like we got to figure it out.
one of the things I would say is, there are bigger issues because, we can talk about war and killing each other and everything like that. But, if everybody's starving to death, you know what I'm saying? Because it's
Yeah,
not enough food because we haven't figured food out. They're saying, I mean, we got 7 billion people on the planet. They're saying in the next 20 years, we'll have 10. Like, I mean, 10 billion people on this planet. There's already food shortages, water shortages. Just imagine another 3 billion people on this planet,
yeah,
and so
especially water. I think water is your bigger play than
water
food.
is a huge problem that needs to
Water
be
is that.
solved. Yeah, we
Yeah,
can use this technology to solve those problems. That's why I think the big disruption is going to happen. Those kind of breakthroughs in energy, breakthroughs like that type of stuff. Like
yeah.
those. That's where the big disruption is going to happen. That's why I'm excited.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. Looking forward to disrupting. And when you exit from those companies, I'll be at a good time then. Let's go and shake up the world together at some point, Tremaine. I really
Absolutely,
appreciate you.
absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you, Rob. This has been incredible.
Yeah, thanks for coming on Disruption Now as always. And I would love to have you at Midwest Con. Let's
Yeah.
definitely keep the conversation going. I will talk to you about. We'll follow up on HBCU, some partnerships there. And I admire everything that you've done. I admire where you've came from, and I'm bullish about your future, brother. Appreciate having you on.
Thanks, Rob. Take
All
care.
right.